Hello, my sleepy friend. I'm Joanne, and I'm thrilled to have you join me as we journey together tonight through the gentle whispers of ancient Japan with a compilation of 10 Japanese folk tales. Each tale holds a unique charm, reflecting not just the beauty of life, but its complexities. These stories don't always promise a happy ending. Instead, they mirror the ebb and flow of the human experience, both the joys and the sorrows and the ups and downs, inviting the listener to engage with themes of resilience and acceptance of the impermanence of life. These tales have been passed down from generation to generation as a reminder that life, in all its unpredictability, is a beautiful journey of growth and understanding. I would like to apologize in advance for any mispronunciations of Japanese names and words within my storytelling. These mispronunciations are not intentional, rather a result of my earnest attempt to share these beautiful stories with you. I sincerely appreciate each of you here at Relax for a While. Your comments and messages truly touch my heart. Your ongoing support and affection fuel my passion to continue creating content that brings peace and relaxation to our community. If you're not already subscribed, please consider doing so. For an even richer experience, join me on Patreon, where you can enjoy ad-free listening and exclusive bi-weekly bedtime stories. You'll find all the relevant links in the video description below. Now, without further ado, let's take a moment to unwind and relax. Close your eyes, breathe deeply, and let go of the worries of the day. Feel the tension melting away as you sink into your cozy space. Relax those beautiful eyes. Soften your brow. Allow your shoulders to ease back. Let your chest and belly be soft. And allow your arms, hands, and fingers, your legs, feet, and toes come to rest. Let them be loose and limp in whichever position brings you the most comfort. And as you continue to nestle in your sleep space and using the power of your imagination, visualizing yourself now in a tranquil garden surrounded by cherry blossoms, with the gentle sound of a babbling brook in the distance. Perhaps you might notice the sensation of a soft, warm breeze that lightly caresses your skin. You might hear birds singing, or the rustling of leaves and tree branches swaying in the soft breeze. You might see soft, fluffy clouds sailing across the vast blue sky above. Let this peaceful imagery soothe your mind and body as you prepare for this bedtime storytelling. And so, my friend, are you ready to be whisked away to the beautiful world of Japan and then all the way to dreamland? Very well. Go ahead and snuggle under those cozy blankets. Allow the warmth of that candlelight fill you with peace. And let's begin. The Black Bowl. Long ago, in a part of the country not very remote from Kyoto, the happy city, there dwelt an honest couple. In a lonely place was their cottage, upon the outskirts of a deep wood of pine trees. Folks had it that the wood was haunted. They said it was full of deceiving foxes. They said that beneath the mossy ground the elves built their kitchens. They said that long-nosed Tengu had tea parties in the forest thrice a month, and that the fairies' children played at hide-and-seek there every morning before 7. Over and above all this, they didn't mind saying that the honest couple were strange in their ways, that the woman was a wise woman, and that the man was a warlock, which was as may be. But sure it was that they did no harm to living soul, that they lived as poor, and that they had one fair daughter. She was as neat and pretty as a princess, and her manners were very fine. But for all that, she worked as hard as a boy in the rice fields, and within doors she was the housewife indeed, for she washed and cooked and drew water. She went barefoot in a gray homespun gown and tied her back hair with a tough wisteria tendril. Brown she was and thin, but the sweetest beggar maid that ever made shift with a bed of dry moss and no supper. By and by, the good man her father dies, and the wise woman her mother sickens within the year, and soon she lies in a corner of the cottage waiting for her end, with the maid near her crying bitter tears. "Child," says the mother, "do you know you are as pretty as a princess?" "Am I that?" says the maid, and goes on with her crying. "Do you know that your manners are fine?" says the mother. "Are they then?" says the maid, and goes on with her crying. "My own baby," says the mother, "could you stop your crying a minute and listen to me?" So the maid stopped crying and put her head close by her mother's on the poor pillow. "Now listen," says the mother, "and afterwards remember. It is a bad thing for a poor girl to be pretty. If she is pretty and lonely and innocent, none but the gods will help her. They will help you, my poor child, and I have thought of the ways besides. Fetch me the great black rice bowl from the shelf." The girl fetched it. "See, now, I put it on your head, and all your beauty is hidden away." "Alack, mother," said the poor child, "it is heavy." "It will save you from what is heavier to bear," said the mother. "If you love me, promise me that you will not move it till the time comes." I promise, but how shall I know when the time comes?" "That you shall know. And now help me outside, for the sweet morning dawns, and I've a fancy to see the fairies' children once again, as they run in the forest. So the child, having the black bowl upon her head, held her mother in her arms in a grassy place near the great trees, and presently they saw the fairies' children threading their way between the dark trunks as they played at hide-and-seek. Their bright garments fluttered, and they laughed lightly as they went. The mother smiled to see them. Before 7, she died very sweetly as she smiled. When her little store of rice was done, the maid with the wooden bowl knew well enough that she must starve or go and find more. So first she tended her father's and mother's graves and poured water for the dead and recited many a holy text. Then she bound on her sandals, kilted her gray skirts to show her scarlet petticoat, tied her household gods in a blue-printed handkerchief, and set out all alone to seek her fortunes, the brave girl. For all her slenderness and pretty feet, she was a rarely odd sight, and soon she was to know it. The great black bowl covered her hair and shadowed her face. As she went through a village, 2 women looked up from washing in the stream, stared and laughed. "It's a boggart come alive," says one. "Out upon her," cries the other, "for a shameless wench, to roam the country thus with her head in a black bowl, as who should cry aloud to every passing man, 'Come and see what is hidden.' It is enough to make a wholesome body sick." On went the poor maid, and sometimes the children pelted her with mud and petals for sport. Sometimes she was handled roughly by village louts who scoffed and caught at her dress as she went. They even laid hands upon the bowl itself and sought to drag it from her head by force. But they only played at that game once, for the bowl stung them as fiercely as if it had been a nettle, and the bullies ran away howling. The beggar maiden might seek her fortune, but it was very hard to find. She might ask for work, but see, would she get it? None were wishful to employ a girl with a black bowl on her head. At last, on a fine day when she was tired out, she sat her upon a stone and began to cry as if her heart would break. Down rolled her tears from under the black bowl. They rolled down her cheeks and reached her white chin. A wandering ballad singer passed that way, with his biwa slung across his back. He had a sharp eye and marked the tears upon the maid's white chin. It was all he could see of her face, and, "Oh, girl with the black bowl on your head," said he, "why do you sit weeping by the roadside?" "I weep," she answered, "because the world is hard. I am hungry and tired. No one will give me work or pay me money." "Now that's unfortunate," said the ballad singer, for he had a kind heart. "But I haven't a rin of my own, or it would be yours. Indeed, I am sorry for you. In the circumstances, the best I can do for you is to make you a little song." With that, he whips his biwa round, thrums on it with his fingers, and starts as easy as you please. "To the tears on your white chin," he says, and sings. The white cherry blooms by the roadside. How black is the canopy of cloud. The wild cherry droops by the roadside. Beware of the black canopy of cloud. Hark! Hear the rain fall from the black canopy of cloud. Alas, the wild cherry, its sweet flowers are marred. Marred are the sweet flowers, forlorn on the spray. Sir, I do not understand your song, said the girl with the bowl on her head. Yet it is plain enough, said the ballad singer, and went his way. He came to the house of a passing rich farmer. In he went, and they asked him to sing before the master of the house. With all the will in the world, says the ballad singer, I will sing him a new song that I've just made. So he sang of the wild cherry and the great black cloud. When he had made an end, tell us the interpretation of your song, says the master of the house. With all the will in the world, said the ballad singer. The wild cherry is the face of a maiden whom I saw sitting by the wayside. She wore a great black wooden bowl upon her head, which is the great black cloud in my song. And from under it her tears flowed like rain, for I saw the drops upon her white chin. And she said that she wept for hunger, and because no one would give her work nor pay her money. Now I might help the poor girl with the bowl on her head, said the master of the house. That you may if you wish, said the ballad singer. She sits but a stone's throw from your gate. The long and short of it was that the maid was put to labor in the rich farmer's harvest fields. All the day long she worked in the waving rice, with her gray skirts kilted and her sleeves bound back with cords. All day long she plied the sickle, and the sun shone down upon the black bowl. But she had food to eat and good rest at night, and was well content. She found favor in her master's eyes, and he kept her in the fields till all the harvest was gathered in. Then he took her into his house, where there was plenty for her to do, for his wife was but sickly. Now the maiden lived well and happily as a bird, and went singing about her labors. And every night she thanked the august gods for her good fortune. Still she wore the black bowl upon her head. At the New Year time, bustle, bustle, says the farmer's wife. Scrub and cook and sew. Put your best foot foremost, my dear, for we must have the house look at its very neatest. To be sure, and with all my heart, says the girl, and she put her back into the work. But mistress, she says, if I may be so bold as to ask, are we having a party? Indeed we are, and many of them, says the farmer's wife. My son, that is in Kyoto, the happy city, is coming home for a visit. Presently home he comes, the handsome young man. Then the neighbors were called in, and great was the merry-making. They feasted and they danced, they jested and they sang. Many a bowl of good red rice they ate. All this time, the girl, with bowl on her head, plied her work modestly in the kitchen, and well out of the way she was. The farmer's wife saw to that, good soul. All the same, one fine day the company called for more wine, and the wine was done. So the son of the house takes up the sake bottle and goes with it himself to the kitchen. What should he see there but the maiden sitting upon a pile of sticks and fanning the kitchen fire with a split bamboo fan. "My life, but I must see what is under that black bowl," says the handsome young man to himself. And sure enough, he made it his daily care, and peeped as much as he could, which was not very much, but seemingly it was enough for him, for he thought no more of Kyoto, the great and happy city, but stayed at home to do his courting. His father laughed, and his mother fretted. The neighbors held up their hands, all to no purpose. "Oh, dear, dear maiden with the wooden bowl, she shall be my bride and no other. I must and will have her," cried the impetuous young man, and very soon he fixed the wedding day himself. When the time came, the young maidens of the village went to array the bride. They dressed her in a fair and costly robe of white brocade and in trailing hakama of scarlet silk, and on her shoulders they hung a cloak of blue and purple and gold. They chattered, but as for the bride, she said never a word. She was sad because she brought her bridegroom nothing, and because his parents were sore at his choice of a beggar maid. She said nothing, but the tears glistened on her white chin. "Now, off with the ugly old bowl," cried the maidens. "It is time to dress the bride's hair and to do it with golden combs." So they laid hands to the bowl and would have lifted it away, but they could not move it. "Try again," they said, and tugged at it with all their might, but it would not stir. "There's witchcraft in it," they said. "Try a third time." They tried a third time, and still the bowl stuck fast, but it gave out fearsome moans and cries. "Ah, let be for pity's sake," said the poor bride, "for you make my head ache." They forced to lead her as she was to the bridegroom's presence. "My dear, I am not afraid of the wooden bowl," said the young man. So they poured the wine from the silver flagon, and from the silver cup the two of them drank the mystic, 3 times 3 that made them man and wife. Then the black bowl burst asunder with a loud noise and fell to the ground in 1,000 pieces. With it fell a shower of silver and gold, and pearls and rubies and emeralds, and every jewel of price. Great was the astonishment of the company as they gazed upon a dowry that for a princess would have been rich and rare. But the bridegroom looked into the bride's face. "My dear," he said, "there are no jewels that shine like your eyes." Green Willow. Tomodatta, the young samurai, owed allegiance to the lord of Noto. He was a soldier, a courtier, and a poet. He had a sweet voice and a beautiful face, a noble form, and a very winning address. He was a graceful dancer and excelled in every manly sport. He was wealthy and generous and kind. He was beloved by rich and by poor. Now his daimyo, the lord of Noto, wanted a man to undertake a mission of trust. He chose Tomodatta and called him to his presence. "Are you loyal," said the daimyo, "My lord, you know it," answered Tomodatta. "Do you love me then?" asked the daimyo. "Aye, my good lord," said Tomodatta, kneeling before him. "Then carry my message," said the daimyo. "Ride, and do not spare your beast. Ride straight, and fear not the mountains nor the enemy's country. Stay not for storm, nor any other thing. Lose your life, but betray not your trust. Above all, do not look any maid between the eyes. Ride, and bring me word again quickly." Thus spoke the Lord of Noto. So Tomodatta got him to horse, and away he rode upon his quest. Obedient to his lord's commands, he spared not his good beast. He rode straight and was not afraid of the steep mountain passes, nor of the enemy's country. Ere he had been 3 days upon the road, the autumn tempest burst, for it was the 9th month. Down poured the rain in a torrent. Tomodatta bowed his head and rode on. The wind howled in the pine tree branches. It blew a typhoon. The good horse trembled and could scarcely keep its feet, but Tomodatta spoke to it and urged it on. His own cloak he drew close about him, and held it so that it might not blow away, and in this wise he rode on. The fierce storm swept away many a familiar landmark of the road, and buffeted the samurai so that he became weary almost to fainting. Noontide was as dark as twilight. Twilight was as dark as night, and when night fell, it was as black as the night of Yomi, where lost souls wander and cry. By this time, Tomodatta had lost his way in a wild, lonely place where, as it seemed to him, no human soul inhabited. His horse could carry him no longer, and he wandered on foot through bogs and marshes, through rocky and thorny tracks, until he fell into deep despair. "Alack," he cried, "must I die in this wilderness, and the quest of the Lord of Noto be unfulfilled?" At this moment, the great winds blew away the clouds of the sky, so that the moon shone very brightly forth, and by the sudden light, Tomodatta saw a little hill on his right hand. Upon the hill was a small thatched cottage, and before the cottage grew 3 green weeping willow trees. "Indeed, the gods be thanked," said Tomodatta, and he climbed the hill in no time. Light shone from the chinks of the cottage door, and smoke curled out of a hole in the roof. The 3 willow trees swayed and flung out their green streamers in the wind. Tomodatta threw his horse's rein over a branch of one of them and called for admittance to the longed-for shelter. At once, the cottage door was opened by an old woman, very poorly but neatly clad. "Who rides abroad upon such a night?" she asked, "and what wills he here?" "I am a weary traveler, lost and benighted upon your lonely moor. My name is Tomodatta. I am a samurai in the service of the Lord of Noto, upon whose business I ride. Show me hospitality for the love of the gods. I crave food and shelter for myself and my horse." As the young man stood speaking, the water streamed from his garments. He reeled a little and put out a hand to hold on by the side post of the door. Come in, young sir," cried the old woman, full of pity. Come in to the warm fire. You are very welcome. We have but coarse fare to offer, but it shall be set before you with great goodwill. As to your horse, I see you have delivered him to my daughter. He is in good hands." At this, Tomodatta turned sharply round. Just behind him, in the dim light, stood a very young girl with the horse's rein thrown over her arm. Her garments were blown about, and her long loose hair streamed out upon the wind. The samurai wondered how she had come there. Then the old woman drew him into the cottage and shut the door. Before the fire sat the good man of the house, and the two old people did the very best they could for Tomodatta. They gave him dry garments, comforted him with hot rice wine, and quickly prepared a good supper for him. Presently, the daughter of the house came in and retired behind a screen to comb her hair and to dress afresh. Then she came forth to wait upon him. She wore a blue robe of homespun cotton. Her feet were bare. Her hair was not tied nor confined in any way, but lay along her smooth cheeks and hung straight and long and black to her very knees. She was slender and graceful. Tomodatta judged her to be about 16 years old, and knew well that she was the fairest maiden he had ever seen. At length, she knelt at his side to pour wine into his cup. She held the wine bottle in 2 hands and bent her head. Tomodatta turned to look at her. When she had made an end of pouring the wine and had set down the bottle, their glances met, and Tomodatta looked at her full between the eyes, for he forgot altogether the warning of his daimyo, the Lord of Noto. "Maiden," he said, "what is your name?" She answered, "They call me the Green Willow." "The dearest name on earth," he said. And again he looked her between the eyes, and because he looked so long, her face grew rosy red from chin to forehead, and though she smiled, her eyes filled with tears. Ah me, for the Lord of Noto's quest! Then Tomodatta made this little song. "Long-haired maiden, do you know that with the red dawn I must go? Do you wish me far away? Cruel long-haired maiden, say, long-haired maiden, if you know that with the red dawn I must go, why, oh why, do you blush so?" And the maiden, the green willow, answered, "The dawn comes if I will or no. Never leave me, never go. My sleeve shall hide the blush away. The dawn comes if I will or no. Never leave me, never go." "Oh, green willow," sighed Tomodatta. That night he lay before the fire still, but with wide eyes, for no sleep came to him though he was weary. He was sick for love of the green willow, yet by the rules of his service he was bound in honor to think of no such thing. Moreover, he had the quest of the Lord of Noto that lay heavy on his heart, and he longed to keep truth and loyalty. At the first peep of day he rose up. He looked upon the kind old man who had been his host, and left a purse of gold at his side as he slept. The maiden and her mother lay behind the screen. Tomodatta saddled and bridled his horse, and mounting, rode slowly away through the mist of the early morning. The storm was quite over, and it was as still as paradise. The green grass and the leaves shone with the wet. The sky was clear, and the path very bright with autumn flowers, but Tomodata was sad. When the sunlight streamed across his saddle bow, "Ah, green willow," he sighed. And at noontide it was green willow, and green willow when the twilight fell. That night he lay in a deserted shrine, and the place was so holy that in spite of it all, he slept from midnight till the dawn. Then he rose, having it in his mind to wash himself in a cold stream that flowed nearby, so as to go refreshed upon his journey. But he was stopped upon the shrine's threshold. There lay the green willow, prone upon the ground. A slender thing she lay, face downwards, with her black hair flung about her. She lifted a hand and held Tomodata by the sleeve. my lord," she said, and fell to sobbing piteously. He took her in his arms without a word, and soon he set her on his horse before him, and together they rode the livelong day. It was little they recked of the road they went, for all the while they looked into each other's eyes. The heat and the cold were nothing to them. They felt not the sun nor the rain. Of truth or falsehood, they thought nothing at all, nor of the filial piety, nor of the Lord of Noto's request, nor of honor nor plighted word. They knew but the one thing, alas, for the ways of love. At last they came to an unknown city where they stayed. Tomodata carried gold and jewels in his girdle, so they found a house built of white wood, spread with sweet white mats. In every dim room there could be heard the sound of the garden waterfall, whilst the swallow flitted across and across the paper lattice. Here they dwelt, knowing but the one thing. Here they dwelt 3 years of happy days, and for Tomodata and the green willow, the years were like garlands of sweet flowers. In the autumn of the 3rd year, it chanced that the 2 of them went forth into the garden at dusk, for they had a wish to see the round moon rise. And as they watched, the green willow began to shake and shiver. "My dear," said Tomodata, "you shake and shiver, and it is no wonder. The night wind is chill. Come in," and he put his arms around her. At this, she gave a long and pitiful cry, very loud and full of agony, and when she had uttered the cry, she failed and dropped her head upon her love's breast. "Tomodata," she whispered, "say a prayer for me. I die." "Oh, say not so, my sweet, my sweet. You are but weary, you are faint." He carried her to the stream's side, where the iris grew like swords and the lotus leaves like shields, and laved her forehead with water. He said, "What is it, my dear? Look up and live." "The tree," she moaned, "the tree. They have cut down my tree. Remember the green willow?" With that she slipped, as it seemed, from his arms to his feet, and he, casting himself upon the ground, found only silken garments, bright-colored, warm and sweet, and straw sandals, scarlet-thonged. In after years, When Tomodatta was a holy man, he traveled from shrine to shrine, painfully upon his feet, and acquired much merit. Once, at nightfall, he found himself upon a lonely moor. On his right hand he beheld a little hill, and on it the sad ruins of a poor thatched cottage. The door swung to and fro with broken latch and creaking hinge. Before it stood 3 old stumps of willow trees that had long since been cut down. Tomodatta stood for a long time still and silent. Then he sang gently to himself. Long-haired maiden, do you know that with the red dawn I must go? Do you wish me far away? Cruel long-haired maiden, say. Long-haired maiden, if you know that with the red dawn I must go, why, oh why, do you blush so? Ah, foolish song, gods forgive me. I should have recited the Holy Sutra for the dead. The Sea King and the Magic Jewels. This is a tale beloved by the children of Japan and by the old folk, a tale of magical jewels and a visit to the Sea King's palace. Prince Rice-Ear Ruddy Plenty loved a beautiful and royal maiden and made her his bride. And the lady was called Princess Blossoming Brightly as the flowers of the trees, so sweetly fair was she. But her father was augustly wrath at her betrothal. For his augustness, Prince Rice-Ear Ruddy Plenty had put aside her elder sister, the Princess of the Rocks, and, indeed, this lady was not fair, for he loved only Princess Blossoming Brightly. So the old king said, because of this, the offspring of these heavenly deities shall be frail, fading and falling like the flowers of the trees. So it is. At this day, the lives of their augustnesses, the heavenly sovereigns, are not long. Howbeit, in the fullness of time, the lady, blossoming brightly as the flowers of the trees, bore 2 lovely men-children, and called the elder Fireflash and the younger Firefade. Prince Fireflash was a fisherman who got his luck upon the wide sea, and ran upon the shore with his august garments girded. And again he tarried all the night in his boat upon the high wave crests, and he caught things broad of fin and things narrow of fin, and he was deity of the water weeds and of the waters and of the fishes of the sea. But Prince Firefade was a hunter who got his luck upon the mountains and in the forest, who bound sandals fast upon his feet, and bore a bow and heavenly feathered arrows, and he caught things rough of hair and things soft of hair, and he knew the trail of the badger and the wild cherry's time of flowering, for he was a deity of the woods. Now Prince Firefade spoke to his elder brother, Prince Fireflash, and said, Brother, I am aweary of the green hills. Therefore, let us now exchange our luck. Give me thy rod, and I will go to the cool waters. Thou mayest take my great bow and all my heavenly feathered arrows, and try the mountains, where, trust me, thou shalt see many strange and beautiful things unknown to thee before. But Prince Fireflash answered, Not so, not so. And again, after not many days were past, Prince Firefade came and sighed. I am aweary of the green hills. The fair waters call me. Woe to be a young brother. And when Prince Fireflash took no heed of him, but angled with his rod, day and night and caught things broad of fin and things narrow of fin, Prince Firefade drooped with desire and let his long hair fall untended upon his shoulders. And he murmured, "Oh, to try my luck upon the sea." Till at last, Prince Fireflash, his elder brother, gave him the rod for very weariness and betook himself to the mountains. All day he hunted and let fly the heavenly feathered arrows, but rough of hair or soft of hair, never a thing did he catch, and he cried, "Fool, fool, to barter the heavenly luck of the gods." So he returned. And his augustness, Prince Firefade, took the luck of the sea and angled in sunshine and in gloom, but broad of fin or narrow of fin, never a fish did he catch, and, moreover, he lost his brother's fishhook in the sea, so he hung his head and returned. And Prince Fireflash said, "Each to his own, the hunter to the mountain and the fisherman to the sea, for thou and I have brought nothing home, and this night we sleep hungry. We may not barter the luck of the gods, and now where is my fishhook?" So Prince Firefade replied, saying softly, "Sweet brother, be not angry, but, toiling all day with the fishy hook, broad of fin or narrow of fin, not a fish did I catch, and at last I lost thy fishhook in the sea." At this, His Highness, Prince Fireflash, flew into a great rage and, stamping his feet, required the fishhook of his brother. And Prince Firefade made answer, "Sweet brother, I have not thy fishhook, but the deep sea, whose bottom no man may search. Though I should die for thee, yet could I not give thee back thy fishhook." But his elder brother required it of him the more urgently. Then Prince Firefade burst the wild wisteria tendrils, which bound his august 10-grasp sword to his side, and he said, "Farewell, good sword." And he broke it into many fragments, and made 500 fishhooks to give to his brother, Prince Fireflash. But Prince Fireflash would have none of them. And again, Prince Firefade toiled at a great furnace, and made 1,000 fishhooks, and upon his knees he humbly offered them to his brother, Prince Fireflash, for he loved his brother. Nevertheless, Prince Fireflash would not so much as look at them, but sat moody, his head on his hand, saying, "Mine own lost fishhook will I have, that and no other." So Prince Firefade went grieving from the palace gates, and wandered lamenting by the seashore, and his tears fell and mingled with the foam. And when night came, he had no heart to return homewards, but sat down, weary, upon a rock amid the salt pools. And he cried, "Alas, my brother, I am all to blame, and through my foolishness has this come upon me. But oh, my brother, together we were nursed upon the sweet breast of our mother, Princess blossoming brightly as the flowers of the trees, for almost hand in hand did we come into the world." And the moon rose so that the sea and the central land of reed plains was light, but Prince Firefade ceased not to lament. Then the Lord of the Sea Salt came with the rising tide and spoke, "Wherefore weeps the heaven's sky height?" And Prince Firefade made answer, "I have taken my brother's fishhook, and I have lost it in the sea, and though I have given him many other fishhooks for compensation, he will have none of them, but desires only the original fishhook. Truly, the gods know, I would give my life to find it, But how should that serve? And the Lord of Sea Salt took him by the sleeve to where a boat moved upon the water, and set him in the boat and pushed it from the shore, saying, My son, pursue the pleasant path that Lord of Sea Salt, his augustness, the moon night possessor, has made for thee upon the waters. And at the end thou shalt come to a palace made of fishes' scales, which is the palace of the great king of the sea. Before the gate there is a clear well, and by the well side there grows a cassia tree with many spreading branches. Therefore climb thou into the branches of the cassia tree, and there wait for the king's daughter, who shall come to give thee counsel. And Prince Firefade, standing up in the boat, made obeisance and thanked the Lord of Sea Salt. But this one girded his august garments and pushed the boat before him till he was thigh deep in the water. And he said, Nay, nay, fair youth, no thanks, only do my bidding. So his augustness, Prince Firefade, came to the Sea King's palace, and he forthwith climbed the cassia tree and waited among its green branches. At the day's dawning came the handmaidens of the Sea King's daughter, with their jeweled vessels, to draw water from the well. And as they stooped to dip their vessels, Prince Firefade leaned and watched them from the branches of the cassia tree, and the glory of his august countenance made a brightness upon the waters of the well. So all the maidens looked up and beheld his comeliness and were amazed. But he spoke them fairly and desired of them a little water from their vessels. So the maidens drew him water in a jeweled cup. Howbeit, the jewels were clouded because of the coldness of the well water, and they presented it to him with all reverence. Then, not drinking the water, Prince Firefade took the royal jewel from his neck, and holding it between his two lips, he dropped it into the cup, and the cup he gave again to the maidens. Now they saw the great jewel shining in the cup, but they could not move it, for it clung fast to the gold. So the maidens departed, skimming the water like the white birds of offing, and they came to the Sea King's daughter, bearing the cup and the jewel in it. And the princess, looking at the jewel, asked them, Is there perchance a stranger at the gate? And one of the maidens answered, There is someone sitting in the branches of the cassia tree, which is by our well. And another said, It is a very beautiful young man. And another said, He is even more glorious than our king, and he asked water of us. So we respectfully gave him water in this cup, and he drank none of it, but dropped a jewel into it from his lips. So we have brought them unto thine augustness, both the cup and the jewel. Then the princess herself took a vessel, and went to draw water at the well, and her long sleeves and certain of the folds of her august garments floated behind her, and her hair was bound with a garland of sea flowers. And coming to the well, she looked up through the branches of the cassia tree, and her eyes met the eyes of Prince Firefade. Presently she fetched her father, the Sea King, saying, Father, there is a beautiful person at our gate. So the Sea King came out and welcomed Prince Firefade and said, This is the august child of the heaven's sun height. And leading him into the palace, he caused the floor to spread with 8 layers of rugs of mule skins and 8 layers of rugs of silk, and set the prince upon them. And that night he made a great banquet, and celebrated the betrothal of Prince Firefade to his daughter, the fair Jewel Princess. And for very many days there was held high revel and rejoicing in the Sea King's palace. But one night, as they took their ease upon the silken floor, and all the fishes of the sea brought rich dishes and sweetmeats in vessels of gold and coral and jade to set before them, the fair Jewel Princess herself sat at Prince Firefade's right hand to pour the wine into his cup, and the silver scales upon the palace walls glittered in the moonlight. But Prince Firefade looked out across the sea path and thought of what had gone before, and so heaved a deep sigh. Then the Sea King was troubled and asked him, saying, "Wherefore dost thou sigh?" But Prince Firefade answered nothing. And the fair Jewel Princess, his betrothed wife, came closer and touched him on the breast and said softly, "O thine augustness, my sweet spouse, art thou not happy in our water palace, where the shadows fall green, that thou lookest so longingly along the sea path? Or do our maidens not please thee, who move silently like the birds of the offing? O my lord, despise me not, but tell me what is in thine heart." Then Prince Firefade answered, "My lovely lady, thine augustness, let nothing be hidden from thee because of our love." And he told them all the story of the fishhook and of his elder brother's wrath. "And now," he said, "will the Jewel Princess give me counsel?" Then the Jewel Princess smiled and rose up lightly, and her hair was so long that it hung to the edge and hem of her silken red robe. And she passed to where the palace steps led down into the water, and standing upon the last step, she called to the fishes of the sea and summoned them, great and small, from far and near. So the fishes of the sea, both great and small, swam about her feet, and the water was silver with their scales. And the king's daughter cried, "O fishes of the sea, find and bring me the august fishhook of Prince Fireflash." And the fishes answered, "Lady, the tie is in misery, for something sticks in his throat so that he cannot eat. Perchance this may be the august fishhook of his augustness, Prince Fireflash." Then the princess stooped down and lifted the tie from the water, and with her white hand she took the lost fishhook from his throat. And after she had washed and dabbled it for a little while, she took it in to Prince Firefade, and he rejoiced and said, "This is indeed my brother's fishhook. I go to restore it instantly, and we shall be reconciled, for he loved his brother." The fair Jewel Princess stood silent and sorrowing, for she thought, "Now he will depart and leave me lonely." Prince Firefade hastened to the water's edge, and there bestrode a valiant crocodile who should bring him to his journey's end. And ere he went, the Sea King spoke, "Fair youth, now listen to my counsel. If thy brother sow rice upon the uplands, do thou sow thy rice low in the water meads. But if thy brother sow his rice in the water meads, then do thou, thine augustness, sow thy rice upon the uplands. And I, who rule the rains and the floods, will continually prosper the labors of thine augustness. Moreover, here are 2 magic jewels. If thy brother should be moved by envy to attack thee, then put forth the tide-flowing jewel, and the waters shall arise to drown him. But if thou shouldst have compassion upon him, then put forth the tide ebbing jewel, and all the waters shall subside, and his life be spared. Prince Firefade gave thanks, and he hid the fishhook in his long sleeve, and hung the 2 great jewels about his neck. Then the fair Jewel Princess came near, and bade him farewell with many tears. And the Sea King charged the crocodile, saying, "While crossing the middle of the sea, do not alarm him." So Prince Firefade sat upon the crocodile's head, and in one day he came to his own place and sprang lightly to shore. And unsheathing his dagger, he hung it upon the crocodile's neck for a token. Hereupon Prince Firefade found his brother, and gave him back his own fishhook that had been lost. Nevertheless, because of the 2 great jewels which he wore in the folds of his raiment, he had everlasting dominion over his brother, and flourished in all his doings. After some time, there came to Prince Firefade, the daughter of the Sea King, the fair Jewel Princess, and she came across the sea path bearing in her arms a young child. And she, weeping, laid down the child at the feet of his augustness and said, "My lord, I have brought thy son." But Prince Firefade raised her up and made her welcome, and built her a palace on the seashore at the limits of the waves. And the palace was thatched with cormorant's feathers, so they dwelt there with the august child. And the fair Jewel Princess besought her lord, saying, "Sweet husband, look not on me in the dark night, for then I must take my native shape. With those of my land it is ever so. Howbeit, look not on me, lest I should be ashamed and misfortune should follow." So Prince Firefade promised her, and spoke many fair words of assurance. Nevertheless, there came a night when Prince Firefade lay awake and could not rest. And, at length, when it was very dark before the dawn, he arose and struck a light to look upon his bride as she slept. And he beheld a great scaled dragon with translucent eyes, which was coiled up at the couch's foot. Prince Firefade cried out aloud for terror and dropped the light. Then morning broke very grey upon the sea, and at the same instant the great dragon stirred, and from its coils the Jewel Princess lifted up her lovely head, and the green scales fell away from her like a garment. So she stood, in a white robe, with her child upon her breast, and she hung her head and wept, saying, "O thine augustness, my sweet spouse, I had thought to have made the sea path a highway between thy land and mine, that we might go and come at pleasure. But now, though I warned thee, thou hast looked upon me in the night. Therefore, my lord, between me and thee it is farewell. I go across the sea path, and of this going there is no return. Take thou the august child." She spoke and departed immediately upon the sea path, weeping and covering her face with her hair and looking back to the shore. And she was never more seen upon the central land of reed plains. Moreover, she shut the gates of the sea and closed the way to her father's palace. But the young maid, her sister, she sent to be a nurse to her babe, and because, for all that had been, she could not restrain her loving heart, she made a little song and sent it to her lord by the maid, her sister, and the song said, "Oh, fair are the red jewels, and fair is the string on which they are strung. Even so, fair is my babe. But brighter far and more renowned are the white jewels, the jewels that are like my lord. Then the husband answered in a song which said, "As for thee, my lady, whom I took to be my bride, to the island where lights the wild duck, the bird of the offing, I shall not forget thee till the end of my life." The Tea Kettle. Long ago, as I've heard tell, there dwelt at the temple of Morinji in the province of Kotsuke a holy priest. Now there were 3 things about this reverend man. First, he was wrapped up in meditations and observances and forms and doctrines. He was a great one for the sacred sutras and knew strange and mystical things. Then he had a fine exquisite taste of his own, and nothing pleased him so much as the ancient tea ceremony of the cha-no-yu. And for the 3rd thing about him, he knew both sides of a copper coin well enough and loved a bargain. None so pleased as he when he happened upon an ancient tea kettle, lying rusty and dirty and half forgotten in a corner of a poor shop in a back street. "An ugly bit of old metal," says the holy man to the shopkeeper, "but it will do well enough to boil my humble drop of water of an evening. I'll give you 3 rin for it." This he did, and took the kettle home, rejoicing, for it was of bronze, fine work, the very thing for the cha-no-yu. A novice cleaned and scoured the tea kettle, and it came out as pretty as you please. The priest turned it this way and that, and upside and down, looked into it, tapped it with his fingernail. He smiled. "A bargain! A bargain!" he cried, and rubbed his hands. He set the kettle upon a box covered with a purple cloth, and looked at it so long that first he was fain to rub his eyes many times, and then to close them altogether. His head dropped forward, and he slept. And then, believe me, the wonderful thing happened. The tea kettle moved, though no hand was near it. A hairy head with 2 bright eyes looked out of the spout. The lid jumped up and down. 4 brown and hairy paws appeared, and a fine bushy tail. In a minute, the kettle was down from the box and going round and round looking at things. "A comfortable room, to be sure," says the tea kettle. Pleased enough to find itself so well lodged, it soon began to dance and to caper nimbly and to sing at the top of its voice. 3 or 4 novices were studying in the next room. "The old man is lively," they said. "Only hark to him. What can he be at?" And they laughed in their sleeves. Heaven's mercy, the noise that the tea kettle made. Bang, bang, thud, thud, thud. The novices soon stopped laughing. One of them slid aside the karakami and peeped through. "Arrah, the devil and all's in it," he cried. "Here's the master's old tea kettle turned into a sort of a badger. The gods protect us from witchcraft, or for certain we shall be lost." "And I scoured it not an hour since," said another novice, and he fell to reciting the holy sutras on his knees. A third laughed. "I'm for a nearer view of the hobgoblin," he said. So the lot of them left their books in a twinkling and gave chase to the tea kettle to catch it. But could they come up with the tea kettle? Not a bit of it. It danced and it leapt and it flew up in the air. The novices rushed here and there, slipping upon the mats. They grew hot, they grew breathless. Ha ha ha, laughed the tea kettle. Catch me if you can, laughed the wonderful tea kettle. Presently, the priest awoke, all rosy, the holy man. And what's the meaning of this racket, he says, disturbing me at my holy meditations and all? Master, master, cried the novices, panting and mopping their brows. Your tea kettle is bewitched. It was a badger, no less, and the dance it has been giving us you'd never believe. Stuff and nonsense, says the priest. Bewitched? Not a bit of it. There it rests on its box. Good quiet thing, just where I put it. Sure enough, so it did, looking as hard and cold and innocent as you please. There was not a hair of a badger near it. It was the novices that looked foolish. A likely story indeed, says the priest. I have heard of the pestle that took wings to itself and flew away, parting company with the mortar. That is easily to be understood by any man. But a kettle that turned into a badger? No, no. To your books, my sons, and pray to be preserved from the perils of illusion. That very night, the holy man filled the kettle with water from the spring and set it on the hibachi to boil for his cup of tea. When the water began to boil, "Aye, aye," the kettle cried. "Aye, the heat of the great hell." And it lost no time at all, but hopped off the fire as quick as you please. "Sorcery," cried the priest. "Black magic! A devil! A devil! Mercy on me! Help! Help!" He was frightened out of his wits, the dear good man. All the novices came running to see what was the matter. "The tea kettle is bewitched," he gasped. "It was a badger. Assuredly it was a badger. It both speaks and leaps about the room." "Nay, master," said a novice. "See where it rests upon its box, good quiet thing." And sure enough, so it did. "Most reverend sir," said the novice, "let us pray to be preserved from the perils of illusion." The next day, the priest sold the tea kettle to a tinker and got for it 20 copper coins. "It's a mighty fine bit of bronze," says the priest. "Mind, I'm giving it away to you. I'm sure I cannot tell what for." Ah, he was the one for a bargain. The tinker was a happy man and carried home the kettle. He turned it this way and that and upside down and looked into it. "A pretty piece," says the tinker. "A very good bargain." And when he went to bed that night, he put the kettle by him to see it first thing in the morning. He awoke at midnight and fell to looking at the kettle by the bright light of the moon. Presently it moved, though there was no hand near it. "Strange," says the tinker. But he was a man who took things as they came. A hairy head with 2 bright eyes looked out of the kettle's spout. The lid jumped up and down. 4 brown and hairy paws appeared, and a fine bushy tail. It came quite close to the tinker and laid a paw upon him. "Well," says the tinker, I'm not wicked, says the Tea Kettle. No, says the tinker, but I like to be well treated. I am a badger tea kettle. So it seems, says the tinker. At the temple, they call me names and beat me and set me on fire. I couldn't stand it, you know. I like your spirit, says the tinker. I think I shall settle down with you. Shall I keep you in a lacquer box, says the tinker. Not a bit of it. Keep me with you. Let us have a talk now and again. I am very fond of a pipe. I like rice to eat, and beans, and sweet things. I'm willing, says the tinker. Thank you kindly, says the Tea Kettle. And, as a beginning, would you object to my sharing your bed? The night has turned a little chilly. Not the least in the world, says the tinker. The tinker and the Tea Kettle became the best of friends. They ate and talked together. The kettle knew a thing or two and was very good company. One day, "Are you poor?" says the kettle. "Yes," says the tinker, "very poor." "Well, I have a happy thought. For a tea kettle, I am out of the way, really very accomplished." "I believe you," says the tinker. "My name is Bumbuku Chugama, and I am the very prince of badger tea kettles." "Your servant, my lord," says the tinker. "If you'll take my advice," says the tea kettle, "you'll carry me round as a show. I really am out of the way, and it's my opinion you'd make a mint of money." "That would be hard work for you, my dear Bumbuku," says the tinker. "Not at all. Let us start forthwith," says the tea kettle. So they did. The tinker bought hangings for a theater, and he called the show Bumbuku Chugama. How the people flocked to see the fun, for the wonderful and most accomplished tea kettle danced and sang and walked the tightrope as to the manner born. It played such tricks and had such droll ways that people laughed till their sides ached. It was a treat to see the tea kettle bow as gracefully as a lord and thank the people for their patience. The Bumbuku Chugama was the talk of the countryside, and all the gentry came to see it, as well as the common alty. As for the tinker, he waved a fan and took the money. You may believe that he grew fat and rich. He even went to court, where the great ladies and the royal princesses made much of the wonderful tea kettle. At last, the tinker retired from business, and to him the tea kettle came with tears in its bright eyes. "I'm much afraid it's time to leave you," it says. "Now don't say that, Bumbuku dear," says the tinker. "We'll be so happy together now we are rich." "I've come to the end of my time," says the tea kettle. "You'll not see old Bumbuku any more. Henceforth I shall be an ordinary kettle, nothing more or less." "Oh, my dear Bumbuku, what shall I do?" cried the poor tinker in tears. "I think I should like to be given to the temple of Morinji as a very sacred treasure," says the tea kettle. It never spoke or moved again. So the tinker presented it as a very sacred treasure to the temple, and the half of his wealth with it. And the tea kettle was held in wondrous fame for many a long year. Some persons even worshipped it as a saint. The Flute. Long since, there lived in Yedo a gentleman of good lineage and very honest conversation. His wife was a gentle and loving lady. To his secret grief, she bore him no sons, but a daughter she did give him, whom they called Oyone, which being interpreted is rice in the ear. Each of them loved this child more than life, and guarded her as the apple of their eye. And the child grew up red and white, and long-eyed, straight and slender as the green bamboo. When Oyone was 12 years old, her mother drooped with the fall of the year, sickened and pined. And ere the red had faded from the leaves of the maples, she was dead and shrouded and laid in the earth. The husband was wild in his grief. He cried aloud. He beat his breast. He lay upon the ground and refused comfort. And for days he neither broke his fast nor slept. The child was quite silent. Time passed by. The man perforce went about his business. The snows of winter fell and covered his wife's grave. The beaten pathway from his house to the dwelling of the dead was snow also, undisturbed save for the faint prints of a child's sandaled feet. In the springtime, he girded up his robe and went forth to see the cherry blossom, making merry enough and writing a poem upon gilded paper, which he hung to a cherry tree branch to flutter in the wind. The poem was in praise of the spring and of sake. Later, he planted the orange lily of forgetfulness and thought of his wife no more, but the child remembered. Before the year was out, he brought a new bride home, a woman with a fair face and a black heart. But the man, poor fool, was happy and commended his child to her and believed that all was well. Now, because her father loved Oyone, her stepmother hated her with a jealous and deadly hatred. And every day she dealt cruelly by the child, whose gentle ways and patience only angered her the more. But because of her father's presence, she did not dare to do Oyone any great ill. Therefore she waited, biding her time. The poor child passed her days and her nights in torment and horrible fear. But of these things she said not a word to her father. Such is the manner of children. Now, after some time, it chanced that the man was called away by his business to a distant city. Kyoto was the name of the city, and from Yedo it is many days' journey on foot or on horseback. Howbeit, go the man needs must, and stay there 3 moons or more. Therefore he made ready, and equipped himself, and his servants that were to go with him, with all things needful. And so came to the last night before his departure, which was to be very early in the morning. He called Oyone to him and said, "Come here then, my dear little daughter." So Oyone went and knelt before him. "What gift shall I bring you home from Kyoto?" he said. But she hung her head and did not answer. "Answer then, rude little one," he bade her. "Shall it be a golden fan, or a roll of silk, or a new obi of red brocade, or a great battledore with images upon it and many light-feathered shuttlecocks?" Then she burst into bitter weeping, and he took her upon his knees to soothe her. But she hid her face with her sleeves and cried as if her heart would break, and, "Oh, Father, Father," she said, "do not go away, do not go away." "But my sweet, I needs must," he answered, "and soon I shall be back, so soon, scarcely it will seem that I am gone, when I shall be here again with fair gifts in my hand." "Father, take me with you," she said. "Alas, what a great way for a little girl! Will you walk on your feet, my little pilgrim, or mount a pack horse? And how would you fare in the inns of Kyoto? Nay, my dear, stay. It is but for a little time, and your kind mother will be with you." She shuddered in his arms. "Father, if you go, you will never see me more." Then the father felt a sudden chill about his heart that gave him pause, but he would not heed it. Must he, a strong man grown, be swayed by a child's fancies? He put Oyone gently from him, and she slipped away as silently as a shadow. But in the morning she came to him before sunrise with a little flute in her hand, fashioned of bamboo and smoothly polished. "I made it myself," she said, "from a bamboo in the grove that is behind our garden. I made it for you. As you cannot take me with you, take the little flute, honorable father. Play on it sometimes if you will, and think of me." Then she wrapped it in a handkerchief of white silk lined with scarlet, and wound a scarlet cord about it, and gave it to her father, who put it in his sleeve. After this he departed and went his way, taking the road to Kyoto. As he went, he looked back thrice, and beheld his child, standing at the gate, looking after him. Then the road turned, and he saw her no more. The city of Kyoto was passing great and beautiful, and so the father of Oyone found it. And what with his business during the day, which sped very well, and his pleasure in the evening, and his sound sleep at night, the time passed merrily, and small thought he gave to Yedo, to his home, or to his child. 2 moons passed, and 3, and he made no plans for return. One evening, he was making ready to go forth to a great supper of his friends, and as he searched in his chest for certain brave silken hakama which he intended to wear as an honor to the feast, he came upon the little flute, which had lain hidden all this time in the sleeve of his traveling dress. He drew it forth from its red and white handkerchief, and as he did so, felt strangely cold with an icy chill that crept about his heart. He hung over the live charcoal of the hibachi as one in a dream. He put the flute to his lips when there came from it a long-drawn wail. He dropped it hastily upon the mats and clapped his hands for his servant and told him he would not go forth that night. He was not well. He would be alone. After a long time he reached out his hand for the flute. Again that long, melancholy cry. He shook from head to foot, but he blew into the flute. "Come back to Yedo. Come back to Yedo, father." The quavering childish voice rose to a shriek and then broke. A horrible foreboding now took possession of the man, and he was as one beside himself. He flung himself from the house and from the city, and journeyed day and night, denying himself sleep and food. So pale was he and wild that the people deemed him a madman and fled from him. At last he came to his journey's end, travel-stained from head to heel, with bleeding feet and half dead of weariness. His wife met him in the gate. He said, "Where is the child?" "The child?" she answered. "Aye, the child, my child. Where is she?" he cried in an agony. The woman laughed. "Nay, my lord, how should I know? She is within at her books, or she is in the garden, or she is asleep, or mayhap she has gone forth with her playmates, or—" He said, "Enough. No more of this. Come, where is my child?" Then she was afraid, and, "In the bamboo grove," she said, looking at him with wide eyes. There the man ran and sought Oyone among the green stems of the bamboos, but he did not find her. He called, "Yone, Yone," and again, "Yone, Yone," but he had no answer. Only the wind sighed in the dry bamboo leaves. Then he felt in his sleeve and brought forth the little flute and very tenderly put it to his lips. There was a faint sighing sound. Then a voice spoke, thin and pitiful. "Father, dear father, my wicked stepmother killed me. 3 moons since she killed me. She buried me in the clearing of the bamboo grove. You may find my bones. As for me, you will never see me any more. You will never see me any more." With his own 2-handed sword, the man did justice and slew his wicked wife, avenging the death of his innocent child. Then he dressed himself in coarse white raiment, with a great rice straw hat that shadowed his face, and he took a staff and a straw raincoat, and bound sandals on his feet, and thus he set forth upon a pilgrimage to the holy places of Japan, and he carried the little flute with him in a fold of his garment upon his breast. Reflections. Long enough ago, there dwelt within a day's journey of the city of Kyoto a gentleman of simple mind and manners, but good estate. His wife, rest her soul, had been dead these many years, and the good man lived in great peace and quiet with his only son. They kept clear of womankind, and knew nothing at all either of their winning or their bothering ways. They had good, steady men servants in their house, and never set eyes on a pair of long sleeves or a scarlet obi from morning till night. The truth is that they were as happy as the day is long. Sometimes they labored in the rice fields. Other days they went a-fishing. In the spring, forth they went to admire the cherry flower or the plum, and later they set out to view the iris or the peony or the lotus, as the case might be. At these times they would drink a little sake and twist their blue and white tenagui about their heads and be as jolly as you please, for there was no one to say them nay. Often enough, they came home by lantern light. They wore their oldest clothes and were mighty irregular at their meals. But the pleasures of life are fleeting, more is the pity, and presently the father felt old age creeping upon him. One night, as he sat smoking and warming his hands over the charcoal, "Boy," says he, "it's high time you got married." "Now the gods forbid," cries the young man. "Father, what makes you say such terrible things? Or are you joking? You must be joking," he says. "I'm not joking at all," says the father. "I never spoke a truer word, and that you'll know soon enough." "But, father, I am mortally afraid of women." "And am I not the same?" says the father. "I'm sorry for you, my boy." "Then what for must I marry?" says the son. "In the way of nature I shall die before long, and you'll need a wife to take care of you." Now the tears stood in the young man's eyes when he heard this, for he was tender-hearted. But all he said was, "I can take care of myself very well." "That's the very thing you cannot," says his father. The long and short of it was that they found the young man a wife. She was young and as pretty as a picture. Her name was Tassel. After they had drunk down the 3 times 3 together and so became man and wife, they stood alone, the young man looking hard at the girl. For the life of him, he did not know what to say to her. He took a bit of her sleeve and stroked it with his hand. Still he said nothing and looked mighty foolish. The girl turned red, turned pale, turned red again, and burst into tears. "Honorable Tassel, don't do that, for the dear God's sake," says the young man. "I suppose you don't think I'm pretty." "My dear," he says, "you're prettier than the bean flower in the field. You're prettier than the little bantam hen in the farmyard. You're prettier than the rose carp in the pond. I hope you'll be happy with my father and me." At this she laughed a little and dried her eyes. "Get on another pair of hakama," she says, "and give me those you've got on you. There's a great hole in them. I was noticing it all the time of the wedding." Well, this was not a bad beginning, and taking one thing with another, they got on pretty well, though of course things were not as they had been in the blessed time when the young man and his father did not set eyes upon a pair of long sleeves or an obi from morning till night. By and by, in the way of nature, the old man died. It is said he made a very good end, and left that in his strong box, which made his son the richest man in the countryside. But this was no comfort at all to the poor young man, who mourned his father with all his heart. Day and night he paid reverence to the tomb. Little sleep or rest he got, and little heed he gave to his wife, Mistress Tassel, and her whimsies, or even to the delicate dishes she set before him. He grew thin and pale, and she, poor maid, was at her wit's end to know what to do with him. At last she said, "My dear, and how would it be if you were to go to Kyoto for a little while?" "And what for should I do that?" he says. It was on the tip of her tongue to answer, to enjoy yourself, but she saw it would never do to say that. "Oh," she says, "as a kind of a duty. They say every man that loves his country should see Kyoto, and besides, you might give an eye to fashions, so as to tell me what like they are when you get home. My things," she said, "are sadly behind the times. I'd like well enough to know what people are wearing." "I've no heart to go to Kyoto," says the young man, "and if I had, it's the planting out time of the rice, and the things not to be done, so there's an end of it." All the same, after 2 days, he bids his wife get out his best hakama and haori and to make up his bento for a journey. I'm thinking of going to Kyoto, he tells her. Well, I am surprised, says Mistress Tassel. And what put such an idea into your head, if I may ask? I've been thinking it's kind of a duty, says the young man. Oh, indeed, says Mistress Tassel to this, and nothing more, for she had some grains of sense. And the next morning, she packs her husband off bright and early for Kyoto, and betakes herself to some little matter of house cleaning she has on hand. The young man stepped out along the road, feeling a little better in his spirits, and before long he reached Kyoto. It is likely he saw many things to wonder at. Amongst temples and palaces he went. He saw castles and gardens, and marched up and down fine streets of shops, gazing about him with eyes wide open, and his mouth too, very like, for he was a simple soul. At length, one fine day, he came upon a shop full of metal mirrors that glittered in the sunshine. Oh, the pretty silver moons, says the simple soul to himself, and he dared to come near and take up a mirror in his hand. The next minute he turned as white as rice and sat him down on the seat in the shop door, still holding the mirror in his hand and looking into it. Why, Father, he said, how did you come here? You were not dead then. Now the dear gods be praised for that. Yet I could have sworn. But no matter, since you are here alive and well. You are something pale still, but how young you look. You move your lips, Father, and seem to speak, but I do not hear you. You'll come home with me and live with us, just as you used to. You smile, that is well. Fine mirrors, my young gentleman, said the shopman, the best that can be made, and that's one of the best of the lot you have there. I see you are a judge. The young man clutched his mirror tight and sat staring stupidly enough, no doubt. He trembled. How much? He whispered. Is it for sale? He was in a taking, lest his father should be snatched from him. For sale it is, indeed, most noble sir, said the shopman, and the price is a trifle, only 2 bu. It's almost giving it away I am, as you'll understand. Only 2 bu? Now the gods be praised for this their mercy, cried the happy young man. He smiled from ear to ear, and he had the purse out of his girdle and the money out of his purse in a twinkling. Now it was the shopman who wished he had asked 3 bu or even 5. All the same, he put a good face upon it and packed the mirror in a fine white box and tied it up with green cords. Father, said the young man, when he had got away with it, before we set out for home, we must buy some gauds for the young woman there, my wife, you know. Now, for the life of him, he could not have told why, but when he came to his home, the young man never said a word to Mistress Tassel about buying his old father for 2 bu in the Kyoto shop. That was where he made his mistake, as things turned out. She was as pleased as you like with her coral hairpins and her fine new obi from Kyoto. I am glad to see him so well and so happy, she said to herself. But I must say he's been mighty quick to get over his sorrow after all. But men are just like children. As for her husband, unbeknown to her, he took a bit of green silk from her treasure box and spread it in the cupboard of the tokonama. There he placed the mirror in its box of white wood. Every morning early and every evening late, he went to the cupboard of the tokonama and spoke with his father. Many a jolly talk they had, and many a hearty laugh together, and the son was the happiest young man of all that countryside, for he was a simple soul. But Mistress Tassel had a quick eye and a sharp ear, and it was not long before she marked her husband's new ways. "What for does he go so often to the Tokonoma?" she asked herself. "And what has he got there? I should be glad enough to know." Not being one to suffer much in silence, she very soon asked her husband these same things. He told her the truth, the good young man. "And now I have my dear old father home again. I'm as happy as the day is long," he says. She says. "And wasn't two boo cheap?" he says. "And wasn't it a strange thing altogether?" "Cheap, indeed," says she, "and passing strange. And why, if I may ask," she says, "did you not say for all this at first?" The young man grew red. "Indeed, then, I cannot tell you, my dear," he says. "I'm sorry, but I don't know." And with that he went out to his work. Up jumped Mistress Tassel the minute his back was turned, and to the Tokonoma she flew on the wings of the wind and flung open the doors with a clang. "My green silk for sleeve linings!" she cried at once. "But I don't see any old father here, only a white wooden box. What can he keep in it?" She opened the box quickly enough. "What an odd, flat, shining thing," she said, and, taking up the mirror, looked into it. For a moment she said nothing at all, but the great tears of anger and jealousy stood in her pretty eyes, and her face flushed from forehead to chin. "A woman!" she cried. "A woman! So that is his secret. He keeps a woman in this cupboard. A woman, very young and very pretty. No, not pretty at all, but she thinks herself so. A dancing girl from Kyoto. I'll be bound. Ill-tempered, too. Her face is scarlet. And oh, how she frowns, nasty little spitfire. Ah, who could have thought it of him? Ah, it's a miserable girl I am, and I've mended his hakama 100 times. Oh, oh!" With that, she threw the mirror into its case and slammed to the cupboard door upon it. Herself she flung upon the mats and cried and sobbed as if her heart would break. In comes her husband. "I've broken the thong of my sandal," says he, "and I've come to—" But what in the world? And in an instant he was down on his knees beside Mistress Tassel, doing what he could do to comfort her and to get her face up from the floor where she kept it. "Why, what is it, my own darling?" says he. "Your own darling?" she answers, very fierce through her sobs. "And I want to go home," she cries. "But, my sweet, you are at home and with your own husband." "Pretty husband," she says, "and pretty goings-on with a woman in the cupboard. A hateful, ugly woman that thinks herself beautiful, and she has my green sleeve linings there with her to boot. Now, what's all this about women and sleeve linings? Sure you wouldn't grudge poor old father that little green rag for his bed. Come, my dear, I'll buy you 20 sleeve linings." At that, she jumped to her feet and fairly danced with rage. Old father, she screamed. "Am I a fool or a child? I saw the woman with my own eyes." The poor young man didn't know whether he was on his head or his heels. "Is it possible that my father is gone?" he said, and he took the mirror from the tokonama. "That's well, still the same old father that I brought for Tubu. You seem worried, father. Nay, then, smile as I do. There, that's well." Mistress Tassel came like a little fury and snatched the mirror from his hand. She gave but one look into it and hurled it to the other end of the room. It made such a clang against the woodwork that servants and neighbors came rushing in to see what was the matter. "It is my father," said the young man. "I bought him in Kyoto for 2 bu. He keeps a woman in the cupboard who has stolen my green sleeve linings," sobbed the wife. After this, there was a great to-do. Some of the neighbors took the man's part, and some the woman's. With such a clatter and chatter and noise as never was, but settle the thing they could not, and none of them would look into the mirror because they said it was bewitched. They might have gone on the way they were till doomsday, but that one of them said, "Let us ask the Lady Abbess, for she is a wise woman," and off they all went to do what they might have done sooner. The Lady Abbess was a pious woman, the head of a convent of holy nuns. She was the great one at prayers and meditations and at mortifyings of the flesh, and she was the clever one nonetheless at human affairs. They took her the mirror, and she held it in her hands and looked into it for a long time. At last she spoke. "This poor woman," she said, touching the mirror, for it's as plain as daylight that it is a woman. "This poor woman was so troubled in her mind at the disturbance that she caused in a quiet house that she has taken vows, shaved her head, and become a holy nun. Thus she is in her right place here. I will keep her and instruct her in prayers and meditations. Go you home, my children. Forgive and forget. Be friends." Then all the people said, "The Lady Abbess is the wise woman," and she kept the mirror in her treasure. Mistress Tassel and her husband went home hand in hand. "So I was right, you see, after all," she said. "Yes, yes, my dear, of course," said the simple young man. "But I was wondering how my old father would get on at the holy convent. He was never much of one for religion." The Good Thunder. Folks say that Horaizan, the thunder, is an unloving spirit, fearful and revengeful, cruel to man. These are folks who are mortally afraid of the storm and who hate lightning and tempest. They speak all the evil they can of Horaizan and of Raitaro, his son, but they are wrong. Horaizan-sama lived in a castle of cloud set high in the blue heaven. He was a great and mighty god, a lord of the elements. Raitaro was his one and only son, a brave boy, and his father loved him. In the cool of the evening, Horaizan and Raitaro walked upon the ramparts of the castle cloud, and from the ramparts they viewed the doings of men upon the land of reed plains. North and south and east and west they looked. Often they laughed, and very often sometimes they sighed. Sometimes Raitaro leaned far over the castle walls to see the children that went to and fro upon earth. One night Raiden Sama said to Raitaro, "Child, look well this night upon the doings of men." Raitaro answered, "Father, I will look well." From the northern rampart they looked, and saw great lords and men-at-arms going forth to battle. From the southern rampart they looked, and saw priests and acolytes serving in a holy temple, where the air was dim with incense, and images of gold and bronze gleamed in the twilight. From the eastern rampart they looked, and saw a lady's bower, where a fair princess and a troop of maidens, clad in rose color, that made music for her. There were children there too, playing with a little cart of flowers. "Ah, the pretty children," said Raitaro. From the western rampart they looked, and saw a peasant toiling in a rice field. He was weary enough, and his back ached. His wife toiled with him by his side. If he was weary, it is easy to believe that she was more weary still. They were very poor, and their garments were ragged. "Have they no children?" said Raitaro. Raiden shook his head. Presently, "Have you looked well, Raitaro?" he said. "Have you looked well this night upon the doings of men?" "Father," said Raitaro, "indeed I have looked well." "Then choose, my son, choose, for I send you to take up your habitation upon the earth." "Must I go among men?" said Raitaro. "My child, you must." "I will not go with the men-at-arms," said Raitaro. "Fighting makes me very ill." "Oh, say you so, my son? Will you go, then, to the fair lady's bower?" "No," said Raitaro. "I am a man. Neither will I have my head shaved to go and live with the priests." "What, then? Do you choose the poor peasant? You will have a hard life and scanty fare, Raitaro." Raitaro said, "They have no children. Perhaps they will love me." "Go, go in peace," said Raiden Sama, "for you have chosen wisely." "How shall I go, my father?" said Raitaro. "Honorably," said his father, "as it befits a prince of high heaven." Now the poor peasant man toiled in his rice field, which was at the foot of the mountain Hakkasan and in the province of Ichizen. Day after day and week after week the bright sun shone. The rice field was dry, and young rice was burnt up. "Alack and alas," cried the poor peasant man, "and what shall I do if my rice crop fails? May the dear gods have mercy on all poor people." With that, he sat himself down on a stone at the rice field's edge and fell asleep for very weariness and sorrow. When he woke, the sky was black with clouds. It was but noonday, but it grew as dark as night. The leaves of the trees shuddered together, and the birds ceased their singing. "A storm! A storm!" cried the peasant. "Raiden Sama goes abroad upon his black horse, beating the great drum of the thunder. We shall have rain in plenty, thanks be." Rain in plenty he had, sure enough, for it fell in torrents, with blinding lightning and roaring thunder. At this bright lightning, "Oh, Raiden Sama," said the peasant, "saving your greatness, this is even more than sufficient." At this, the bright lightning flashed anew and fell to the earth in a ball of living fire, and the heavens cracked with a mighty peal of thunder. I, cried the poor peasant man. Kwannon, have mercy on a sinful soul, for now the thunder dragon has me indeed. And he lay on the ground and hid his face. Howbeit, the thunder dragon spared him, and soon he sat up and rubbed his eyes. The ball of fire was gone, but a babe lay upon the wet earth, a fine fresh boy with the rain upon his cheeks and his hair. "O lady, Lady Kwannon," said the poor peasant man, "this is thy sweet mercy," and he took the boy in his arms and carried him to his own home. As he went, the rain still fell, but the sun came out in the blue sky, and every flower in the cooler air shone and lifted up its grateful head. The peasant came to his cottage door. "Wife, wife," he called, "I have brought you something home." "What may it be?" said his wife. The man answered, "Raitaro, the eldest son of the thunder." Raitaro grew up straight and strong, the tallest, happiest boy of all the countryside. He was the delight of his foster parents, and all the neighbors loved him. When he was 10 years old, he worked in the rice fields like a man. He was the wonderful weather prophet. "My father," he said, "let us do this and that, for we shall have fair weather." Or he said, "My father, let us the rather do this or that, for tonight there will be a storm." And whatever he had said, sure enough, it came to pass. And he brought great good fortune to the poor peasant man, and all his works prospered. When Raitaro was 18 years old, all the neighbors were bidden to his birthday feast. There was plenty of good sake, and the good folk were merry enough. Only Raitaro was silent and sad and sorry. "What ails you, Raitaro?" said his foster mother. "You who are the happiest boy, why are you silent, sad and sorry?" "It is because I must leave you," Raitaro said. "Nay," said his foster mother, "never leave us, Raitaro, my son. Why would you leave us?" "Mother, because I must," said Raitaro in tears. "You have been our great fortune. You have given us all things. What have I given you? What have I given you, Raitaro, my son?" Raitaro answered, "3 things you have taught me: to labor, to suffer, and to love. I am more learned than the immortals." Then he went from them, and in the likeness of a white cloud, he scaled heaven's blue height till he gained his father's castle. And Horaizan received him. The 2 of them stood upon the western rampart of the castle of cloud and looked down to the earth. The foster mother stood weeping bitterly, but her husband took her hand. "My dear," he said, "it will not be for long. We grow old apace." The Star Lovers. All you that are true lovers, I beseech you pray the gods for fair weather upon the 7th night of the 7th moon. For patience' sake and for dear love's sake, pray and be pitiful that upon that night there may be neither rain, nor hail, nor cloud, nor thunder, nor creeping mist. Hear the sad tale of the star lovers, and give them your prayers. The weaving maiden was the daughter of a deity of light. Her dwelling was upon the shore of the Milky Way, which is the bright river of heaven. All the day long she sat at her loom and plied her shuttle, weaving the gay garments of the gods. Warp and woof, hour by hour, the colored web grew till it lay fold on fold piled at her feet. Still, she never ceased her labor, for she was afraid. She had heard a saying, "Sorrow, age-long sorrow, shall come upon the weaving maid when she leaves her loom." So she labored, and the gods had garments to spare. But she herself, poor maiden, was ill-clad. She recked nothing of her attire or of the jewels that her father gave her. She went barefoot and let her hair hang down unconfined. Ever and anon a long lock fell upon the loom, and back she flung it over her shoulder. She did not play with the children of heaven or take her pleasure with celestial youths and maidens. She did not love or weep. She was neither glad nor sorry. She sat weaving, weaving, and wove her being into the many-colored web. Now her father, the deity of light, grew angry. He said, "Daughter, you weave too much." "It is my duty," she said. "At your age to talk of duty," said her father. "Wherefore are you displeased with me, my father?" she said, and her fingers plied the shuttle. "Are you a stalk or a stone, or a pale flower by the wayside?" "Nay," she said, "I am none of these." "Then leave your loom, my child, and live. Take your pleasure, be as others are." "And wherefore should I be as others are?" she said. "Never dare to question me. Come, will you leave your loom?" She said, "Sorrow, age-long sorrow, shall come upon the weaving maiden when she leaves her loom." "A foolish saying," cried her father, "not worthy of credence. What do we know of age-long sorrow? Are we not gods?" With that, he took her shuttle from her hand gently and covered the loom with a cloth, and he caused her to be very richly attired. And they put jewels upon her and garlanded her head with flowers of paradise. And her father gave her for spouse the herd boy of heaven, who tended his flocks upon the banks of the bright river. Now the maiden was changed indeed. Her eyes were stars and her lips were ruddy. She went dancing and singing all the day. Long hours she played with the children of heaven, and she took her pleasure with the celestial youths and maidens. Lightly she went. Her feet were shod with silver. Her lover, the herd boy, held her by the hand. She laughed so that the very gods laughed with her, and high heaven re-echoed with the sounds of mirth. She was careless. Little did she think of duty or of the garments of the gods. As for her loom, she never went near it from one moon's end to another. "I have my life to live," she said. "I'll weave it into a web no more." And the herd boy, her lover, clasped her in his arms. Her face was all tears and smiles, and she hid it on his breast. So she lived her life. But her father, the deity of light, was angry. "It is too much," he said. "Is the girl mad? She will become the laughing stock of heaven. Besides, who is to weave the new spring garments of the gods?" 3 times he warned his daughter. 3 times she laughed softly and shook her head. "Your hand opened the door, my father," she said, "but no hand either of God or of mortal can shut it." He said, "You shall find it otherwise to your cost," and he banished the herd boy forever and ever to the farther side of the bright river. The magpies flew together from far and near, and they spread their wings for a frail bridge across the river, and the herd boy went over the frail bridge, and immediately the magpies flew away to the ends of the earth, and the weaving maiden could not follow. She was the saddest thing in heaven. Long, long she stood upon the shore and held out her arms to the herd boy who tended his oxen, desolate and in tears. Long, long she lay and wept upon the sand. Long, long she brooded, looking on the ground. She arose and went to her loom. She cast aside the cloth that covered it. She took her shuttle in her hand. "Age-long sorrow," she said, "age-long sorrow." Presently she dropped the shuttle. "Ah," she moaned, "the pain of it," and she leaned her head against the loom. But in a little while she said, "Yet I would not be as once I was. I did not love or weep. I was neither glad nor sorry. Now I love and I weep, and I am glad and I am sorry." Her tears fell like rain, but she took up the shuttle and labored diligently, weaving the garments of the gods. Sometimes the web was gray with grief. Sometimes it was rosy with dreams. The gods were fain to go strangely clad. The maiden's father, the deity of light, for once was well pleased. "This is my good, diligent child," he said. "Now you are quiet and happy." "The quiet of dark despair," she said. "Happy? I am the saddest thing in heaven." "I am sorry," said the deity of light. "What shall I do?" "Give me back my lover." "Nay, child, that I cannot do. He is banished forever and ever by the decree of a deity that cannot be broken." "I knew it," she said. "Yet something I can do," he said. "Listen. On the 7th day of the 7th moon, I will summon the magpies together from the ends of the earth, and they shall be a bridge over the bright river of heaven, so that the weaving maiden shall lightly cross to the waiting herd boy on the farther shore. So it was. On the 7th day of the 7th moon came the magpies from far and near, and they spread their wings for a frail bridge, and the weaving maiden went over by the frail bridge. Her eyes were like stars, and her heart like a bird in her bosom, and the herd boy was there to meet her upon the farther shore. And so it is still. O true lovers, upon the 7th day of the 7th moon, these two keep their tryst. Only if the rain falls with thunder and cloud and hail, and the bright river of heaven is swollen and swift, the magpies cannot make a bridge for the weaving maiden. Alack, the dreary time! Therefore, true lovers, pray the gods for fair weather. The Peony Lantern. In Yedo, there dwelt a samurai called Hajiwara. He was a samurai of the Hatamoto which is of all the ranks of samurai the most honorable. He possessed a noble figure and a very beautiful face, and was beloved of many a lady of Yedo, both openly and in secret. For himself, being yet very young, his thoughts turned to pleasure rather than to love, and morning, noon, and night he was wont to disport himself with the gay youth of the city. He was the prince and leader of joyous revels within doors and without, and would often parade the streets for long together with bands of his boon companions. One bright and wintry day during the festival of the New Year, he found himself with a company of laughing youths and maidens, playing at battledore and shuttlecock. He had wandered far away from his own quarter of the city, and was now in a suburb quite the other side of Yedo, where the streets were empty more or less, and the quiet houses stood in gardens. Hajiwara wielded his heavy battledore with great skill and grace, catching the gilded shuttlecock and tossing it lightly into the air. But at length, with a careless or ill-judged stroke, he sent it flying over the heads of the players and over the bamboo fence of a garden nearby. Immediately he started after it. Then his companions cried, "Stay, Hajiwara, here we have more than a dozen shuttlecocks." "Nay," he said, "but this was dove-colored and gilded." "Foolish one," answered his friends, "here we have 6 shuttlecocks all dove-colored and gilded." But he paid them no heed, for he had become full of a very strange desire for the shuttlecock he had lost. He scaled the bamboo fence and dropped into the garden which was upon the farther side. Now he had marked the very spot where the shuttlecock should have fallen, but it was not there. So he searched along the foot of the bamboo fence, but no, he could not find it. Up and down he went, beating the bushes with his battledore, his eyes on the ground, drawing breath heavily as if he had lost his dearest treasure. His friends called him, but he did not come, and they grew tired and went to their own homes. The light of day began to fail. Hajiwara, the samurai, looked up and saw a girl standing a few yards away from him. She beckoned him with her right hand, and in her left she held a gilded shuttlecock with dove-colored feathers. The samurai shouted joyfully and ran forward. Then the girl drew away from him, still beckoning him with the right hand. The shuttlecock lured him, and he followed. So they went, the 2 of them, till they came to the house that was in the garden, and 3 stone steps that led up to it. Beside the lowest step there grew a plum tree in blossom, and upon the highest step there stood a fair and very young lady. She was most splendidly attired in robes of high festival. Her kimono was of water blue silk, with sleeves of ceremony so long that they touched the ground. Her underdress was scarlet, and her great girdle of brocade was stiff and heavy with gold. In her hair were pins of gold and tortoiseshell and coral. When Hajiwara saw the lady, he knelt down forthwith and made her do obeisance till his forehead touched the ground. Then the lady spoke, smiling with pleasure like a child. Come into my house, Hajiwara, samurai of the Hatamoto. I am Otsuyu, the Lady of the Morning Dew. My dear handmaiden, Oyone, has brought you to me. Come in, Hajiwara, samurai of the Hatamoto, for indeed I'm glad to see you, and happy is this hour. So the samurai went in, and they brought him to a room of 10 mats, where they entertained him, for the Lady of the Morning Dew danced before him in the ancient manner, whilst Oyone, the handmaiden, beat upon a small scarlet tasseled drum. Afterwards, they set food before him, the red rice of the festival, and sweet warm wine, and he ate and drank of the food they gave him. It was dark night when Hajiwara took his leave. Come again, honorable lord, come again, said Oyone, the handmaiden. Yes, lord, you needs must come, whispered the Lady of the Morning Dew. The samurai laughed. And what if I do not come? He said mockingly. The lady stiffened, and her child's face grew gray, but she laid her hand upon Hajiwara's shoulder. Then she said, It will be death, Lord. Death it will be for you and for me. There is no other way. Oyone shuddered and hid her eyes with her sleeve. The samurai went out into the night, being very much afraid. Long he sought for his home and could not find it, wandering in the black darkness from end to end of the sleeping city. When at last he reached his familiar door, the late dawn was almost come, and wearily he threw himself upon his bed. Then he laughed. I have left behind me my shuttlecock, said Hajiwara the samurai. The next day, Hajiwara sat alone in his house from morning till evening. He had his hands before him, and he thought but did nothing more. At the end of the time, he said, It is a joke that a couple of geisha have sought to play on me. Excellent in faith, but they shall not have me. So he dressed himself in his best and went forth to join his friends. For 5 or 6 days he was at joustings and junketings, the gayest of the gay. His wit was ready, his spirits were wild. Then he said, By the gods, I am deathly sick of this, and took to walking the streets of Yedo alone. From end to end of the great city he went. He wandered by day and he wandered by night. By street and alley he went, by hill and moat and castle wall, but he found not what he sought. He could not come upon the garden where his shuttlecock was lost, nor yet upon the Lady of the Morning Dew. His spirit had no rest. He fell sick and took to his bed, where he neither ate nor slept, but grew spectre thin. This was about the 3rd month. In the 6th month, at the time of the hot and rainy season, he rose up, and, in spite of all his faithful servant could say or do to dissuade him, he wrapped a loose summer robe about him, and at once went forth. Alack, alack, cried the servant. The youth has the fever, or he is perchance mad. Hajiwara faltered not at all. He looked neither to the right nor to the left. Straight forward he went, for he said to himself, All roads lead past my love's house. Soon he came to a quiet suburb, and to a certain house whose garden had a split bamboo fence. Hajiwara laughed softly and scaled the fence. The same, the very same shall be the manner of our meeting, he said. He found the garden wild and overgrown. Moss covered the 3 stone steps. The plum tree that grew there fluttered its green leaves disconsolate. The house was still. Its shutters were all closed. It was forlorn and deserted. The samurai grew cold as he stood and wondered. A soaking rain fell. There came an old man into the garden. He said to Hajiwara, "Sir, what do you do here?" "The white flower has fallen from the plum tree," said the samurai. "Where is the lady of the morning dew?" "She is dead," answered the old man. "Dead these 5 or 6 moons of a strange and sudden sickness. She lies in the graveyard on the hill, and Oyone, her handmaid, lies by her side. She could not suffer her mistress to wander alone through the long night of Yomi. For their sweet spirit's sake, I would still tend this garden, but I am old, and it is little that I can do. Oh, sir, they are dead indeed. The grass grows on their graves." Hajiwara went to his own home. He took a slip of pure white wood, and he wrote upon it in large fair characters the dear name of his lady. This he set up, and burned before it incense and sweet odors, and made every offering that was meet, and did due observance, and all for the welfare of her departed spirit. Then drew near the festival of Bon, the time of returning souls. The good folk of Yedo took lanterns and visited their graves, bringing food and flowers. They cared for their beloved dead. On the 13th day of the 7th month, which in the Bon is the day of days, Hajiwara the samurai walked in his garden by night for the sake of the coolness. It was windless and dark. A cicala, hidden in the heart of a pomegranate flower, sang shrilly now and again. Now and again a carp leaped in the round pond. For the rest it was still, and never a leaf stirred. About the hour of the ox, Hajiwara heard the sound of footsteps in the lane that lay beyond his garden hedge. Nearer and nearer they came. "Women's Geta," said the samurai. He knew them by the hollow echoing noise. Looking over his rose hedge, he saw 2 slender women coming out of the dimness hand in hand. One of them carried a lantern with a bunch of peony flowers tied to the handle. It was such a lantern as is used at the time of the Bon in the service of the dead. It swung as the 2 women walked, casting an uncertain light. As they came abreast of the samurai upon the other side of the hedge, they turned their faces to him. He knew them at once and gave one great cry. The girl with the peony lantern held it up so that the light fell upon him. "Hajiwara," she cried, "why, Lord, we were told that you were dead. We have daily recited the Nembutsu for your soul these many moons." Come in, Oyone," he said. "And is it indeed your mistress that you hold by the hand? Can it be my lady? Oh, my love." Oyone answered, "Who else should it be?" And the 2 came in at the garden gate. But the lady of the morning dew held up her sleeve to hide her face. "How was it I lost you?" said the samurai. "Lord," she said, We have moved to a little house, a very little house in the quarter of the city which is called the Green Hill. We were suffered to take nothing with us there, and we are grown very poor. With grief and want my mistress is become pale. Then Hajiwara took his lady's sleeve to draw it gently from her face. Lord, she sobbed, you will not love me. I am not fair. But when he looked upon her, his love flamed up within him like a consuming fire and shook him from head to foot. He said never a word. She drooped. Lord, she murmured, shall I go or stay? And he said, stay. A little before daybreak, the samurai fell into a deep sleep and awoke to find himself alone in the clear light of the morning. He lost not an instant, but rose and went forth, and immediately made his way through Yedo to the quarter of the city which is called the Green Hill. Here he inquired for the house of the Lady of the Morning Dew, but no one could direct him. High and low he searched fruitlessly. It seemed to him that for the second time he had lost his dear lady, and he turned homewards in bitter despair. His way led him through the grounds of a certain temple, and as he went, he marked two graves that were side by side. One was little and obscure, but the other was marked by a fair monument, like the tomb of some great one. Before the monument there hung a lantern with a bunch of peony flowers tied to its handle. It was such a lantern as is used at the time of Bon in the service of the dead. Long, long did the samurai stand as one in a dream. Then he smiled a little and said, we have moved to a little house, a very little house upon the Green Hill. We were suffered to take nothing with us there, and we are grown very poor. With grief and want my mistress is become pale. A little house, a dark house, yet you will make room for me, O my beloved, pale one of my desires. We have loved for the space of 10 existences. Leave me not now, my dear. Then he went home. His faithful servant met him and cried, now what ails you, master? He said, why, nothing at all. I was never merrier. But the servant departed weeping and saying, the mark of death is on his face, and shall I go that bore him as a child in these arms? Every night for 7 nights, the maidens with the Peony Lantern came to Hajiwara's dwelling. Fair weather or foul was the same to them. They came at the hour of the ox. There was mystic wooing. By the strong bond of illusion, the living and the dead were bound together. On the 7th night, the servant of the samurai, wakeful with fear and sorrow, made bold to peer into the Lord's room through a crack in the wooden shutters. His hair stood on end, and his blood ran cold to see Hajiwara in the arms of a fearful thing, smiling up at the horror that was its face, stroking its dank green robe with languid fingers. With daylight, the servant made his way to a holy man of his acquaintance. When he had told his tale, he asked, is there any hope for Hajiwara? Alack, said the holy man, who can withstand the power of karma? Nevertheless, there is a little hope. So he told the servant what he must do. Before nightfall, this one had set a sacred text above every door and window place of his master's house. and he had rolled in the silk of his master's girdle a golden emblem of the Tathagata. When these things were done, Hajiwara, being drawn 2 ways, became himself as weak as water, and his servant took him in his arms, laid him upon his bed, and covered him lightly, and saw him fall into a deep sleep. At the hour of the ox, there was heard the sound of footsteps in the lane without the garden hedge. Nearer and nearer they came. They grew slow and stopped. "What means this, Oyone?" said a piteous voice. "The house is asleep, and I do not see my lord." "Come home, sweet lady. Hajiwara's heart is changed." "That I will not, Oyone. You must find a way to bring me to my lord." "Lady, we cannot enter here. See the holy writing over every door and window place? We may not enter here." There was a sound of bitter weeping and a long wail. "Lord, I have loved thee through the space of 10 existences." Then the footsteps retreated, and their echo died away. The next night it was quite the same. Hajiwara slept in his weakness. His servant watched. The wraiths came and departed in sobbing despair. The 3rd day, when Hajiwara went to the bath, a thief stole the emblem, the golden emblem of the Tathagata, from his girdle. Hajiwara did not mark it, but that night he lay awake. It was his servant that slept, worn out with watching. Presently a great rain fell, and Hajiwara, waking, heard the sound of it upon the roof. The heavens were opened, and for hours the rain fell, and it tore the holy text from over the round window in Hajiwara's chamber. At the hour of the ox, there was heard the sound of footsteps in the lane without the garden hedge. Nearer and nearer they came. They grew slow and stopped. "This is the last time, Oyone. Oyone, therefore bring me to my lord. Think of the love of 10 existences. Great is the power of karma. There must be a way." "Come, my beloved," called Hajiwara with a great voice. "Open, Lord, open, and I come." But Hajiwara could not move from his couch. "Come, my beloved," he called for the 2nd time. "I cannot come, though the separation wounds me like a sharp sword." Thus we suffer for the sins of a former life. So the lady spoke and moaned like the lost soul that she was. But Oyone took her hand. "See the round window," she said. Hand in hand, the 2 rose lightly from the earth. Like vapor, they passed through the unguarded window. The samurai called, "Come to me, beloved," for the 3rd time. He was answered, "Lord, I come." In the gray morning, Hajiwara's servant found his master cold and dead. At his feet stood the Peony Lantern burning with a weird yellow flame. The servant shivered, took up the lantern, and blew out the light. Horaizan. Jofuku was the wise man of China. Many books he read, and he never forgot what was in them. All the characters he knew as he knew the lines in the palm of his hand. He learned secrets from birds and beasts, and herbs and flowers and trees, and rocks and metals. He knew magic and poetry and philosophy. He grew full of years and wisdom. All the people honored him, but he was not happy, for he had a word written upon his heart. The word was mutability. It was with him day and night, and sorely it troubled him. Moreover, in the days of Jofuku, a tyrant ruled over China, and he made the wise man's life a burden. "Jofuku," he said, "teach the nightingales of my wood to sing me the songs of the Chinese poets." Jofuku could not do it for all his wisdom. "Alas, liege," he said, "ask me another thing, and I will give it to you, though it cost me the blood of my heart." "Have a care," said the emperor. "Look to your ways. Wise men are cheap in China. Am I one to be dishonored?" "Ask me another thing," said the wise man. "Well then, send me the peony with the scent of the jessamine." The peony is brilliant, imperial. The jessamine is small, pale, and foolish. Nevertheless, its perfume is sweet. Send me the peony with the scent of the jessamine. But Jofuku stood silent and downcast. "By the gods," cried the emperor, "this wise man is a fool. Here, some of you, off with his head." "Liege," said the wise man, "spare me my life, and I will set sail for Horaizan, where grows the herb immortality. I will pluck this herb and bring it back to you again, that you may live and reign forever." The emperor considered. "Well, go," he said, "and linger not, or it will be the worse for you." Jofuku went and found brave companions to go with him on the great adventure, and he manned a junk with the most famous mariners of China, and he took stores on board and gold, and when he had made all things ready, he set sail in the 7th month about the time of the full moon. The emperor himself came down to the seashore. "Speed, speed, wise man," he said. "Fetch me the herb immortality, and see that you do it presently. If you return without it, you and your companions shall die the death." "Farewell, liege," called Jofuku from the junk. So they went with a fair wind for their white sails. The boards creaked, the ropes quivered, the water splashed against the junk's side. The sailors sang as they steered a course eastward. The brave companions were merry, but the wise man of China looked forward and looked back, and was sad because of the word written upon his heart, mutability. The junk of Jofuku was for many days upon the wild sea, steering a course eastwards. He and the sailors and the brave companions suffered many things. The great heat burnt them, and the great cold froze them. Hungry and thirsty they were, and some of them fell sick and died. More were slain in fight with pirates. Then came the dread typhoon and mountain waves that swept the junk. The masts and the sails were washed away with rich stores, and the gold was lost forever. Drowned were the famous mariners, and the brave companions every one. Jofuku was left alone. In the grey dawn he looked up. Far to the east he saw a mountain, very faint, the color of pearl, and on the mountain top there grew a tall tree with spreading branches. The wise man murmured, "The island of Horaizan is east of the east, and there is Fusan, the Wonder Mountain. On the heights of Fusan there grows a tree whose branches hide the mysteries of life." Jofuku lay weak and weary and could not lift a finger. Nevertheless, the junk glided nearer and nearer to the shore. Still and blue grew the waters of the sea, and Jofuku saw the bright green grass and the many-colored flowers of the island. Soon there came troops of young men and maidens bearing garlands and singing songs of welcome, and they waded out into the water and drew the junk to the land. Jofuku was aware of the sweet and spicy odors that clung to their garments and their hair. At their invitation, he left the junk, which drifted away and was no more seen. He said, "I have come to Horaizan the Blessed." Looking up, he saw that the trees were full of birds with blue and golden feathers. The birds filled the air with delightful melody. On all sides there hung the orange and the citron, the persimmon and the pomegranate, the peach and the plum. The ground at his feet was as a rich brocade, embroidered with every flower that is. The happy dwellers in Horaizan took him by the hands and spoke lovingly to him. "How strange it is," said Jofuku. "I do not feel my old age any more." "What is old age?" they said. "Neither do I feel any pain." "Now what is pain?" they said. "The word is no longer written on my heart." "What word do you speak of, beloved?" "Mutability is the word." "And what may be its interpretation?" "Tell me," said the wise man, "is this death?" "We have never heard of death," said the inhabitants of Horaizan. The wise man of Japan was Wazobiobi. He was full as wise as the wise man of China. He was not old but young. The people honored him and loved him. Often he was happy enough. It was his pleasure to venture alone in a frail boat out to sea, there to meditate in the wild and watery waste. Once as he did this, it chanced that he fell asleep in his boat, and he slept all night long, while his boat drifted out to the eastward. So when he awoke in the bright light of morning, he found himself beneath the shadow of Fusan, the Wonder Mountain. His boat lay in the waters of a river of Horaizan, and he steered her amongst the flowering iris and the lotus and sprang on shore. "The sweetest spot in the world," he said. "I think I have come to Horaizan the Blessed." Soon came the youths and maidens of the island, and with them the wise man of China, as young and as happy as they. "Welcome, welcome, dear brother," they cried. "Welcome to the island of eternal youth." When they had given him to eat of the delicious fruit of the island, they laid them down upon a bank of flowers to hear sweet music. Afterwards, they wandered in the woods and groves. They rode and hunted, or bathed in the warm sea water. They feasted and enjoyed every delightful pleasure. So the day lingered, and there was no night, for there was no need of sleep. There was no weariness and no pain. The wise man of Japan came to the wise man of China. he said. I cannot find my boat. What matter, brother, said Jofuku. You want no boat here. Indeed, my brother, I do. I want my boat to take me home. I am sick for home. There's the truth. Are you not happy in Horaizan? No, for I have a word written upon my heart. The word is humanity. Because of it, I am troubled and have no peace. Strange, said the wise man of China. Once too I had a word written on my heart. The word was mutability, but I have forgotten what it means. You too will forget. Nay, I can never forget, said the wise man of Japan. He sought out the crane, who is a great traveler, and besought her, Take me home to my own land. Alas, the crane said, if I did, so you would die. This is the island of eternal youth. Do you know you have been here for 100 years? If you go away, you will feel old age and weariness and pain. Then you will die. No matter, said the Wazobi-Obi, take me home. Then the crane took him on her strong back and flew with him. Day and night she flew, and never tarried and never tired. At last she said, Do you see the shore? And he said, I see it. Praise be to the gods. She said, Where shall I carry you? You have but a little time to live. Good crane, upon the dear sand of my country, under the spreading pine, there sits a poor fisherman, mending his net. Take me to him, that I may die in his arms. So the crane laid Wazobi-Obi at the poor fisherman's feet, and the fisherman raised him in his arms, and Wazobi-Obi laid his head against the fisherman's humble breast. I might have lived forever, he said, but for the word that is written on my heart. What word? Said the fisherman. Humanity is the word, the wise man murmured. I am grown old. Hold me closer. Ah, the pain. He gave a great cry. Afterwards he smiled. Then his breath left him with a sigh, and he was dead. It is the way of all flesh, said the fisherman. Sweet dreams, my friend. Sleep well.